All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started.
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here, and I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Dafna Lender. Dafna, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So Dafna is an international trainer and supervisor for practitioners who work with children and families. She's a certified trainer and supervisor consultant in both Theraplay and Dyadic Developmental Psychotherapy. Her expertise is drawn from 25 years of working with families with attachment in many settings, including at-risk after-school programs, therapeutic foster care, in-home crisis stabilization. Her style, whether as a therapist or teacher, is combining the lighthearted with the profound by bringing a playful, intense, and passionate presence to every encounter. She is likely to break out into song as engaged in serious intellectual discourse. Well, don't you sound like a Zen master? All right, welcome. Before we get going here, and I love that bio, by the way, before we get going, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are now.
Okay, I'm originally from the Judean hills of Jerusalem, and I live in Evanston, Illinois, which is the first suburb north of Chicago.
Okay. All right. So let's dive in here. It's really a simple question. How the heck did you get into this field? What
Excellent.
pulled you, compelled you, inspired you?
Yeah. Well, when I first became a social worker, my first job out of social work school was in therapeutic foster care. So I had to take kids who were in a residential program because they couldn't make it in a foster home, and they lived in a residential center for 2 years. Then I was supposed to take them and put them in a new foster home that would be a long-term placement. And the bottom line is that job was way too big for my small social work self. I could not figure out how to make these placements work. And I was so discouraged that I thought I should leave social work and become a mortgage breaker. At the time, this was like before, this was in the heyday when you could make a lot of money as a mortgage broker. And I was thinking, wow, I'm really in the wrong profession. And I just felt so discouraged because the kids would have these wonderful foster parents that we had prepared, we thought, really well. And then when the kids made it into the home, after about 3 months, they would start showing their true colors, which is that they were traumatized and were really, really fearful of intimate relationships with people who were constantly watching and looking at them and checking in on them and looking, what's their best interest. Okay. So imagine that in the middle of the night, if a kid has a need or something, or they have a stomach ache and a parent comes in, well, this child thinks that the parent is going to be mad at them and abuse them and scream at them for having a tummy ache or something. So they don't want that foster parent to come in and check on them. And so they will do everything to avoid that intimacy. It's all they can do. And so what they did was crazy things. Like one kid cut the drapes with the scissors, another kid, harassed and tortured the family dog. Another kid pooped in a corner. I mean, these are things day in and day out. The foster parents could not handle those behaviors. I was the one who was supposed to go in and help the families. I had no resources. And so when I found the two modalities that I found at that time, really two gurus that I ended up meeting at that time, really were completely changed my personal life, of course, definitely my professional life. Those two people are Phyllis Booth, who is the founder and co-creator of Theraplay, which is a therapy for kids and families, and based out of Chicago. And Phyllis is literally my spiritual mentor, rabbi, teacher, mother. And then Daniel Hughes, who is a psychologist out of Maine that developed and created Dyadic developmental psychotherapy. Why these two things? Because they, simply put, they were really practical and they worked. And all I wanted, why did I come to this? That's a whole other story. Why did I become a social worker? Because I had trauma and I wanted to help kids. And this made me feel like I was helping. Okay.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because you're saying a lot of really good stuff, a lot of rich stuff. Phyllis Booth, Daniel Hughes.
Yeah.
I want to explore in a little bit more detail about how these resources helped you. But before we do that, Dafna, you just started talking about your own trauma, and not that I'm asking you to talk specifically about that, but what was it? When was it? In what period of your life did you say, okay, I want to start helping people in this way? And what did you do?
Gosh, probably from the time that I was, 3 or 6 years old, probably. So my background, nobody comes to this field in just to for purely, objective, I want to help the world. It comes from our history, and my family is a traumatized family with a Holocaust background and a father who is a war veteran and seriously injured in war. And then we emigrated from Israel really in a way that was extremely traumatic and disruptive. We were essentially kind of excised out, my sister and I, without being able to properly say goodbye, without ever knowing when we were going to come back again. And my mother following my father in this sort of kind of almost, I don't want to say abusive, but a very forced way of removing us from our family home and the only, in our home country. She had no voice in that. And I really took that in as it was my job to save her, because she was really, really downtrodden and had no voice. And that was my entire existence, was how to save my mom from my dad, and also the isolation of being essentially kind of a lost family in America, never really acclimated. And I embodied that dynamic between warring between my parents, and that really devastated me as like a teenager. And in my college years, I became so clinically depressed, and I had major addiction to basically food, sugar, binging and purging and things like that made it so I shut down. And that's when I got my first contact with the therapist that, reoriented me to this world of that this isn't my fault, that I'm not just a weak-willed person, and that I'm crazy, bad, or stupid. Mm-hmm. And then I said, wow, this is this is where I'm doing whatever he's doing, I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. So
that was the beginning of things.
So what unfolded? Did you go to, did you pursue these classes in college or what?
So when I graduated from undergrad and had that therapy experience, I then went to social work school.
Okay.
And then got this job in foster care. And the reason that I got into the job without really knowing anything specific about child trauma or about foster care and attachment issues that result from abuse and neglect, separation and loss, that kind of thing, wasn't particularly compelled to that. But once I got in, it was like this drama was occurring where these kids were seeing these horrible things. And I remember them coming into the agency, having had one triad of siblings they saw their mother shot and bled to death in the bed that they were in together. And that, I just remember that I could not, I couldn't survive. I couldn't get out of that scene that I saw those children come into our foster care agency. There was nothing that could make me put myself back together to think I'm going to continue in this profession
Mm-hmm.
until I saw a woman who was a practitioner in Theraplay deal with one of those kids. And I thought, oh, okay, all right, let me take this next step and do this training, since my other option is to leave the field. And I did that. I took that training. It was a 4-day training. It was in Chicago. It was convenient enough. It didn't cost that much money. That was one of the things that changed my life. It changed my life because not only professionally, but one of the things that had happened was I had completely disconnected from my body by that point. And that was when I was 20, I would have been age 29. And all of a sudden in Theraplay, it was like, hold on, this is body work for children. Okay. This is really, it's parent and child therapy that's based very much about attachment activities to awaken the body, to integrate the body, and for the parent to be able to see what the child needs from a nonverbal level. And at that moment, I remember going home from the training and thinking to myself, I can draw a bath and get myself in the bath and actually feel my body and the temperature of the water and the whatever, the soap bubbles, everything that sensual part that I completely had cut off from. And it was through the Theraplay training that I realized I was missing this whole mind-body integration. And it was really a transformation, really changed my path in terms of my health.
In that training, what specifically was that instructor doing that made that light go off for you?
Well, I remember there was a kid that was adopted from China, and we were watching a live demonstration of working with her. And being adopted, you're in an orphanage, you don't get picked up and you don't get held and fed on, on demand, but more on a schedule. And the attunement to the body's needs, hadn't been present for her. Well, for some reason, so she was then 4, and I was watching Phyllis, who was the therapist and the trainer, really help to notice the nonverbals. The child would look one way, and then the Phyllis would make something of it, like, oh, you want that, you're reaching for that. Let me get that for you. Or, oh, your hands are cold. Let's warm them up for you. Or when she fussed, they sang and rocked her and things. And I noticed real similarities between that girl and myself, and the focus on the body's engagement, the body's physical comfort, and the what it means to co-regulating a child. That's what they demonstrated in that therapy or in that training. And I wasn't able to do that for myself. It's a real conundrum, because I don't know, my mom, my own mother, who passed away, she actually did do a lot of those things, and yet so much of the attunement was also missing. So it was really confusing to me. Yet what I was able to understand from that is, yes, I can begin to feel what my body temperature is, or what feels nice to me, and hadn't realized until that moment that I had so many sensory issues. Like all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, I can't wear this sweater. Oh my God, I can't wear these earrings. I can't sit in this chair anymore. So it was like this whole awakening. I think it was partly what we saw in the training, and just the permission to start exploring, this mind and body connection.
It sounds amazing. First of all, the training in and of itself sounds incredible, and the way you're describing how this kind of blew open the doors of the therapeutic soul, in a sense, sounds amazing as well. So, how did things unfold? You went to this training. What were the next steps? Did you realize, oh my God, I got to get my own stuff together before I can help these kids? Or what was it like for you?
Oh yeah. I remember a tremendous, flood of emotions, and a lot of feelings of all of a sudden sadness and self-compassion. And I had to think to myself about, the therapy that I was doing. It was a start, but it wasn't helping as much as I wanted it to. It did not address the food, weight, and body image issues. And I had to, realize that I had to move on to a different kind of therapy. I attended and I'm a member of a 12-step group for food, weight, and body image issues. And a lot of that centers around getting out of one's way in terms of one's ego. A lot of the thinking in addictions has to do with like, I'm the most messed up person. Everybody doesn't like me. I am, that paralysis of shame. And then the part of thinking that you're in control of everything. And this 12-step group really blew open a lot of kind of all these thought defects that I had, but most importantly, made me feel like I am not alone. That's the most important thing. I'm not a freak. And there's a way forward with this. And I think this 12-step model, it's really important that the people in it are not therapists versus and clients. There's no gap. It's all people helping each other, and it's peer support. That you can call on them anytime, day or night, literally night and day. And that worked for me. Whereas therapy didn't, like this, I was psychodynamically focused, did not work for me. So that was a part of my journey, was coming out of the shadow of this, food, weight, and body image issue, which really was only transformed through this huge network of people who knew exactly how I felt and who were there to say, these are the steps, you can get through this. And it's not through these old like coping skills that you used to use. So that was part of the journey, and the journey still continues today. I have done EMDR therapy for myself. I'm an EMDR therapist myself, but that has also been a really important part to free up the attachment trauma that I inherited from my childhood.
Just remind everyone, I'm speaking with Dafna Lender at dafnalender.com. That's DAFNALENDER.com. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. So what do you do now? What are you doing now? And what's your mission?
Okay. I'm fascinated by the parent-child relationship, and I want to heal trauma before the people in our society get to adults. Okay. So that's my passion. I want therapists to work with kids and their parents. A lot of therapists, Guy, work with adults. You know why? Because kids are super messy. You got me? They're crazy. I mean, they will call your bluff before you can say, good morning. Right?
Right.
And it is so messy to work with kids and their parents, because there's nothing more triggering to parents than their children. And parenting is the biggest like spiritual and existential conundrum ever, because we're supposed to be selfless with them, but we're super selfish about them. We're supposed to be, altruistic, but we've got to have boundaries. There are spitting image, and yet they are weird and they do their own stuff. And the tension between that gap of like, how much are they pleasing me and kind of molding, how much am I supposed to mold them in my image? That touches on the deepest non-conscious parts of parents' own attachment history. And I'm fascinated with the journey that parents make as they're helping their children grow up and holding their children, giving them enough of that holding environment to be able to guide them and support them while letting them be themselves. And so I'm interested in that, because I think a lot of really like small T traumas happen within the attachment relationship of very typical families. So not necessarily the abuse and neglect of the foster care system that I had been working in. So I do parent-child therapy. It's attachment based. I call it integrative attachment family therapy, because it integrates all of the learning that I've done over these 25 years. And it combines Theraplay and DDP plus EMDR and just a lot of the somatic work that I've been interested in. But so I'm a trainer and I'm a supervisor, and I want first one thing. What drives me? One thing that it drives me is to convince therapists to focus more on children in the family and work directly with them and bring them into the session and ask about them. Okay, so that's the prevention part.
Now, do you have courses on this for therapists?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, talk a little bit about that. So people listening to this, obviously are therapists, they're survivors, they're coaches of all kinds and so forth. Who are these courses for?
I have the majority of my courses are for therapists, and because I am a trainer in DDP and in Theraplay. So DDP is Dyadic, Developmental Psychotherapy, and Theraplay. Those courses are for therapists. I run another training that is a more general training called Integrative Attachment Family Therapy, IAFT, and that is for therapists and also for clients like families, because they get a lot out of just knowing the information and be able to kind of work on it on their own. And then I have a smaller program for parents called Reflections for Parents about their own attachment history and helping them to separate out their sort of what's their own issues and demons and help guide them to be more regulated and so that they can meet their child where their child is at. And that's all those programs are available, in more detail on my website, if people want to read about the different programs.
We'll have those linked up again here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. All right. As we close down here, I worked with kids for a bit, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But I want to hear from you, Dafna, what it was like for you in the beginning. I want you to, if you can, share like an early clinical error.
Okay. Let me think about an early clinical error.
Because I know if you're working with kids.
Oh God, there were so many of them that, I can remember an occasion, a pretty painful occasion where I'm a pretty exuberant force in the therapy room and can sometimes get kids riled up. But I can't bring them back down. And these are kids who have trauma, right? So you excite them, by, let's say, throwing cotton balls around or balloons, and then somebody kicks somebody by mistake and they're off to the races. In their minds, we've created an abusive situation. And I was trying to, so this kid was kicking and then slamming the door and different things that, were dangerous, like trying to knock things over. And I saw that the parent was immobilized and didn't know, shy, they was kind of looking to me. And I tried to make it into a playful interaction because that's what I thought that I was supposed to do. I was supposed to keep the connection. I was supposed to not shame them. I was supposed to show them that I wasn't afraid of their anger. And that really set that, one kid in particular off, and he thought that I was egging him on or teasing him more. And so he ended up sort of like punching and kicking his mom. And I insisted on continuing to be playful. So it was a real lack of attunement on, he needed a lot. First of all, he needed a lot less stimulation, and he needed some real quick, putting some boundaries around his behavior, which I didn't do. And I think that I really kind of re-traumatized that parent and child dyad. And I just remember them walking out of the office and down the elevator. I escorted them, and although those doors closed, I saw those two were looking like, what just happened, deer in the headlights. Yeah. And it was super, I mean, it took me days to settle down from that because I
Right.
knew that it had gone crazy.
I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you've been doing this long now for 25 years. What is it now at this point do you feel helps you get in there and work with the kids and the mom and the parents?
Okay. Yeah. Well, one thing is I feel like I prepare parents a great deal by letting them know, hey, I'm going to be the boss in here and I'm going to be in charge, which means I'm going to have to call you out on things. And is that okay? How would you like me to do that? And if I offend you, which I probably will, we're going to have every fourth session at least is going to be a parent session only, but as needed, especially if I piss you off, and I will, because parents are they're kind of out of control. So, and more so than the children. And so what helps me is that I don't care anymore. If I lose clients.
Right.
Because I've gotten to the point where I have my own private practice and I'm attracting more families that say, just tell us how you're going to work.
Right.
And we respect you for that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'm just going to call it like it is. And I'm going to tell parents a hard truth. I'm going to do it with empathy. But most of the time I find that the parents are the ones who need, twice as much work as the kids and the parent together. Mm-hmm. And I just feel really comfortable having gotten to that place of understanding that this is the vehicle we need to work through. Right. And I'm good with that.
Right. I love that. All right. Look, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Good. Yeah. The website, and on my website is www.dafnalender.com, and there's a contact. So there I will be able to see everybody's emails, or okay. There's also a newsletter.
Okay. And before we go, I know we talked about Phyllis Booth and Daniel Hughes, but any other book you want to mention that, whether trauma related or not, that's inspired you?
Okay. Golly jeepers. Well, since there's so many, I want to say just one, an oldie but goodie, the best one that explains attachment theory to me in all its complexity is Becoming Attached, second edition, Robert Karen.
Okay.
Becoming Attached. And the reason is he tells it through his own really granular experience of his he's a storyteller, and he tells stories about his mom. In addition to making all of the attachment like heroes and characters like John Bowlby and Ainsworth come to life in a storytelling way. So that gets me there. Anybody who's going to tell me a story, I'm going to sit and listen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, look, Dafna, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your stories. You're a pleasure to talk to, and I'd love to have you back at some point.
That'd be great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the work you're doing. You're very intense, and I love it. I love it. I love talking to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Really appreciate it, Guy.
You're welcome. All right, have a great day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
So long. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.